My name is Anna J. Orr, 30 years old. Dennis showed up when I was 12 with a duffel bag, a belt buckle the size of a bad decision, and an attitude that came through the door before he did. Within a week, he'd claimed Dad's chair, renamed the workshop his storage, and found his favorite hobby, calling me worthless. You'll never amount to anything over cereal. Grades don't pay the bills when I brought home A's, playing pretend at being useful when I wiped grease off my first paycheck at 14. Mom would smooth his words like wrinkles in a tablecloth. He's just toughening you up, as if humiliation were vitamins and I needed a daily dose. The worst part wasn't the insults, it was the erasure. Dad's photos drifted off the walls like leaves in a wind none of us admitted existed. Trophies of animals Dennis didn't eat, stared where family used to. Even Dad's coffee mug, the one with the chipped rim and the faint ring of varnish scent, accidentally shattered. By 18, the house felt like a crime scene that had learned to smile. Graduation dinner tasted like meatloaf and surrender. Dennis raised his glass, beer in a can, elevated to a toast by volume. Time to face reality, he announced. College is for smart kids. You barely scraped by. Get a real job. Start paying rent. I looked at Mom, hoping for a rescue. She crossed her arms, chin tight. Dennis has a point. That night, I folded my acceptance letter into the inner pocket of my jacket like a passport and slipped out before sunrise. I told them I'd be figuring things out. What I didn't say, I'd been figuring things out for 2 years. 3 jobs, tips in a coffee can, cash in a shoebox, quiet Goodwill blouses for interviews. How much is a person worth? Enough for a deposit on a dorm that wasn't a dorm, for a meal plan called Whatever's on Sale, for textbooks borrowed and returned unbroken. Worth enough to leave. College wasn't a movie. It was fluorescent lights and midnight grease on a diner griddle, the ammonia sting of office cleaning on weekends, and tutoring 3 students whose parents called me dear and tipped like guilt. My roommates went out when the campus throbbed. I learned which library corners stayed warm and which ones didn't. When exhaustion sat on my chest like a heavy cat at 3 a.m., I heard Dennis worthless. I would sit up and make a flashcard for a class I didn't even like and whisper back, watch me. After graduation, while colleagues celebrated offer letters with champagne, I said yes to a small investment firm with bad carpet and honest numbers. They upgraded their cars. I upgraded my discipline. Studio apartment, 15-year-old Honda, a second job disguised as curiosity. I enrolled in night classes about cap rates and 1031 exchanges, devoured forums, toured properties I couldn't afford, so I could recognize them when I could. Every spare dollar became a seed. The first rental closed when I was 24. The second at 25. By 26, I had 4 doors and a ledger that looked like a map home. Meanwhile, Mom's Instagram turned into a travel brochure, Vegas bathroom selfies with gold fixtures, a boat named after a joke, filtered wine country sunsets. Living our best life, the caption read beneath a house that had once been paid off. Then alerts began to ping my phone. Public records, notices you can subscribe to if you're the sort of person who has learned not to trust luck. Late mortgage payment filed. Another. A line of red across the bottom edge of Dad's home. He'd paid that mortgage off the year before he died. Dennis had convinced Mom to refinance. Unlock equity, money working for you. We deserve this. The world calls it cash out. It felt like pawning a wedding ring for a weekend. Foreclosure filings are public and polite. A date in 12-point font. A minimum bid that says we don't care who you are, only what you have. I formed a shell company that sounded like a bird you've never seen and a tree you can't afford. I ran the numbers 3 times, then a 4th, because superstition and caution share a face. On auction day, I offered just enough above the floor to be invisible and inevitable. 60 cents on the dollar. Worthless, he'd said. I wired the money of a life he'd tried to crush back to the house he had tried to own. The day I signed the deed, the county office smelled like dust and relief. The clerk stamped the papers with a thunk that sounded like finality, but was really only a beginning. I drove straight to Maple Street anyway. Dennis's truck slouched in the driveway, rust around the wheel well. Mom's sedan sat obediently beside it. The porch boards creaked the same complaint they always had. The door had a new wreath that tried too hard. I knocked once. Dennis opened in a stained t-shirt that had lost its argument with gravity. Recognition walked across his face like a weather system. Surprise, confusion, then the sneer that had lived here rent-free for 18 years. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he said. "Come crawling back to Mommy?" "Actually," I said, holding up the paper, "I came to deliver this. You have 30 days to vacate my property." He took it. His eyes darted across the words like they were booby-trapped. 30 days. Owner. Michelle LLC. Case number, signature. He went pale the way people go when their story meets someone else's facts. Behind him, Mom's voice floated down the hall, soft with habit. "Who is it?" "Impossible," Dennis muttered. "There's no way you could—" "Funny thing about being worthless," I said. "It's great motivation." Mom appeared at his shoulder, a dish towel still in her hand, like she meant to keep cleaning through whatever this was, her forehead wrinkled the way it did when I used to try to explain math. "Rowan?" She looked at the paper, at me, at Dennis, then back at the paper, as if one of us would correct itself. "What is this?" "I bought the house, Mom," I said. "This is your eviction notice." The towel fell. The floor didn't catch it in time. If she had said, "I'm sorry," if she had said, "I didn't know," if she had said anything that bent toward me, maybe the next 10 minutes would have framed themselves differently. Instead, Dennis's face rearranged into something that looked like a promise he'd been keeping for a mean day. He stepped closer, breath hot with beer. "You think you're clever," he said quietly, the kind of quiet that belongs in small rooms with no witnesses. "You have no idea what you've just started." He slammed the door so hard the frame shuddered. Through the thin wall of my childhood, I heard him begin to scream. Not words yet, just volume. Then words. At Mom. At me. At fate. Something broke. A glass. Or the part of her that still mistook noise for strength. A heavy thud against the wall where Dad's bookshelves had once held the weight of a life. Mom's voice rose, pleading and small. I stood on the porch for a count of 10 and asked myself if I should call the police. Then I swallowed the impulse. Mom had chosen her corner years ago and painted over the door. If she wanted out, she had my number. The paper in his hand had a number 2, 30. That would have to be the language we spoke now. Driving away, satisfaction and unease rode shotgun, elbowing each other like siblings. 12 years of planning had brought me to a hinge. The door had swung. But all my systems, spreadsheets, reserves, the calm that makes other people think you don't feel, warned me. Men like Dennis don't go quietly. They go loudly, and they go dirty. At 6 the next morning, my phone woke me. Mom's number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered because I am not a monster and because sometimes old habits sound like responsibility. She was already crying. "You have to undo this," she said, words running together. "Dennis says you're trying to make us homeless. We have nowhere to go." "You have 30 days, I said, voice level. "That's more notice than most tenants get." "This is our home," she said. "Your father—" "My father never wanted Dennis living here," I said, the reflex fast and unforgiving. Her breath hitched. "Please, he's talking about doing something terrible if we lose the house." "What kind of terrible?" "I can't. You know how he gets." I did. I also knew that his worst violence had always been in his words, aimed like knives but thrown from a safe distance. "If he threatens you, you can come stay with me. Dennis isn't welcome." "I can't leave him," she said, as if I'd suggested she cut off a hand. "You chose him over me a long time ago," I said. "Now, live with that choice." I hung up and put the phone face down on the counter. It buzzed again before it even settled. A cascade of numbers I didn't recognize that I would come to know like a rash. I silenced the phone, poured coffee, and looked out at a city that had no idea what the word worthless could build when you let it. By afternoon, the calls had multiplied. Unfamiliar voices yelling into my voicemail about respect and blood. Emails to my work address accusing me of theft. CC'd to my boss, like a grenade labeled family matter. Screenshots to a folder. Forward to my attorney with the subject line, documentation. In the quiet between pings, I caught my breath and listened for the click of a lock I had changed years ago. The one inside me that says you do not have to open yourself to anyone who arrives pounding. On day 1, the notice was a piece of paper. On day 30, it would be a sheriff at a door. In between lay a month, And in that month, I could already feel Dennis scheming. Mom's towel had hit the floor. The frame had shaken. The house remembered. So did I. The first week after the eviction notice was the calm before the hurricane, too quiet to trust. Dennis didn't call, didn't email, didn't show up. The silence had a shape to it, and it wasn't peace. It was planning. On day 7, the phone started ringing again. Different numbers, different voices. "You're heartless," one voicemail sneered. "Throwing your own mother on the street," another. "Dennis told us everything. You stole the house from him." By day 10, the calls were relentless. I changed my number twice. It didn't help. Then came the emails. Anonymous at first, then from Dennis himself. They were long, furious, written like manifestos. "You'll pay for this. I built that house. You wouldn't have anything without me. You think money makes you better?" He CC'd my boss, my coworkers, even the building's management. He wanted me humiliated, dragged down to his level. I forwarded every email to my lawyer. "This is harassment," she said. "We can file for a restraining order, but it might light the fuse." I thought about it for half a second. Light it. The papers were served 2 days later. By noon, Dennis was on the phone again. One last call before the order took effect. His voice was low, calm in a way that chilled me. "You always were ungrateful. I gave you everything you have. I made you tough. You'll see what that toughness costs." Click. That same evening, security from my office called. "There's a man downstairs demanding to see you. Says he's your father." I froze. "He's not." "Should we call the police?" "Yes, right now." By the time I got to the lobby, Dennis was already in handcuffs, shouting about thieves and traitors, while people recorded on their phones. His voice echoed through the glass atrium, ugly, familiar. The officer gave me a tired look. "Violation of a restraining order is a misdemeanor. He'll spend a few days in jail. File a new report if he contacts you again." I nodded, but my gut told me this wasn't the end. Dennis wasn't built to quit. He was released 3 days later. That night, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My living room window. A brick lay on the floor, wrapped in duct tape, with a single word scrawled across it in Sharpie: worthless. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no proof, just the calling card of a man too proud to sign his work. The next morning, my car tires were slashed. The day after, someone filled my office mailbox with dead fish. The police took statements but had nothing to hold him on. My lawyer sighed. "You could hire private security." "I could," I said, "or I could end this." She didn't ask what I meant. That night, I made a call to someone who owed me a favor. My old college roommate, Priscilla, now a cybersecurity analyst with an interesting moral flexibility. "I need a digital ghost story," I told her. "What kind of story?" "The kind that tells me everything about a man who won't stop until he's ruined me." She hesitated. "Rowan, if this goes sideways, we never had this conversation." "I'll take that deal." 3 days later, she sent an encrypted file. No message, no subject line, just a password I already knew by instinct. Worthless. I opened it in my office with the blinds drawn. Dennis wasn't just a bully, he was a criminal. The file detailed 5 years of theft from his construction company, over $200,000, skimmed from budgets, fake invoices, inflated material costs. There were screenshots of gambling sites, bank transfers to offshore accounts, even IOUs to names that looked more like threats than people. He'd been using the house, Dad's house, as collateral for private loans he was now defaulting on. The refinance hadn't been about vacations or boats. It had been about survival, paying off debts to men who didn't accept apologies as currency. I sat there staring at the screen, the truth crystallizing. Dennis wasn't fighting for a roof over his head. He was fighting for his life. The countdown hit 20 days. No moving trucks, no packing, just silence and attention thick enough to hear. On day 25, my phone rang. "This is the fire department. Is this the owner of 412 Maple Street?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." "There's been an incident. You need to come down here." The drive felt endless, and when I arrived, red lights painted the house like an open wound. Smoke curled lazily from the old workshop in the back, Dad's workshop. The fire chief met me at the curb. Small blaze, contained quickly. Good thing neighbors called it in. "What happened?" He looked uncomfortable. "Anonymous tip said a woman matching your description was seen fleeing the scene." My chest went cold. "What?" He sighed. "You were at work, right? With 24 witnesses and building cameras. Then you've got nothing to worry about. We found accelerant residue and fingerprints on the gas can. His fingerprints." Dennis had tried to frame me. He'd set fire to Dad's workshop, probably thinking an insurance claim would save him, or at least hurt me on the way down. The investigator was blunt. He's looking at felony arson and filing a false police report, plus whatever you add for the harassment. I walked through the charred remains of Dad's workshop. The smell of smoke clung to everything, black streaks crawling up the walls like veins. The sight made something inside me lock into place. It was time to end this. I called Dennis's employer, a construction firm run by a man named Brixton Fletcher. His secretary tried to brush me off until I said, "It's about embezzlement." 15 minutes later, I was sitting in Fletcher's office, handing over a folder of evidence. He was in his 70s, weary eyes behind thick glasses. He flipped through each page slowly, the color draining from his face. 5 years, he whispered. He's been stealing from me for 5 years. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I thought you should know. He closed the folder and set it on the desk. Don't be sorry. You did the right thing. That afternoon, Dennis was fired and escorted off the job site. Fletcher called the police himself to file charges. By evening, Dennis was back in handcuffs. The next morning, Mom called. I almost didn't answer. You destroyed his life, she sobbed. They arrested him at work. Everyone saw. He destroyed his own life, Mom. I just stopped pretending not to see it. You don't understand, she said, voice trembling. The people he owes, they're dangerous. Without his job, he can't pay them back. Then maybe he shouldn't have stolen in the first place. Please, she begged. Let him come back. He'll change. I laughed, sharp and humorless. You've been saying that for 15 years. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. I hung up and called a rapid clean-out company. By noon the next day, everything Dennis and Mom owned was on the curb in cardboard boxes and garbage bags. The locks were changed again, cameras upgraded. I stood in the empty living room, surrounded by dust and sunlight, feeling the walls breathe again. The house looked smaller, cleaner, like it had been waiting all this time for air. Dad's workshop could be rebuilt. I couldn't rebuild him, but I could restore what he'd made. It was the first time in years that the house felt like home again. But Dennis wasn't finished yet, not even close. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. No slamming doors, no shouting from the other room, no footsteps pacing over old floorboards that had learned to brace for impact. I spent the next 3 months rebuilding what Dennis had tried to burn, literally and figuratively. Dad's workshop became my refuge. I sanded the charred wood, replaced every ruined plank, and rehung the shelves Dennis had once ripped out to make room for his beer fridge. Each hammer swing felt like punctuation, a steady beat reminding me this was mine now, not his. The more I rebuilt, the more I realized something. Dad's craftsmanship still lived in the bones of the house. It had just been buried under years of someone else's chaos. By the end of summer, the place looked like it remembered itself. The photos were back on the walls. Dad smiling beside his first truck, Mom before she became someone else's echo, and one of me at 5 years old, holding a paintbrush twice my size. Even Dad's old coffee mug, the one Dennis had accidentally broken, sat on a shelf again. I'd found it years earlier at a thrift store, the crack repaired with gold lacquer, kintsugi style. The flaw made it more beautiful. So did mine. I'd just finished repainting the last room when the doorbell rang. Through the camera, I saw a woman in her 50s with kind, tired eyes and a cautious smile. I opened the door halfway. Can I help you? She extended a business card. Patricia Fletcher. The logo matched the name of the construction company Dennis had worked for. I'm Brixton Fletcher's daughter, she said softly. My father wanted to thank you personally, but he's not well enough to travel. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. Please, come in. She walked slowly, taking in the house like she could still see the ghosts. This place is lovely, she murmured. Feels honest. Thank you, I said. She sat down on the couch, her purse in her lap. Your information about Dennis saved our family business, she began. We were weeks from bankruptcy. Dad kept blaming himself, said maybe he was getting too old, maybe he couldn't keep track anymore, but he wasn't crazy. Dennis was stealing from us. Her voice trembled, but not from anger, from exhaustion. I stayed silent, letting her finish. He wanted me to give you this, she said, sliding an envelope across the coffee table. Inside was a check, $50,000. I can't accept this, I said immediately, pushing it back. It's not charity, she said firmly. It's restitution. We recovered most of the money through insurance, thanks to the evidence you gave us. Dad insisted you deserve something for your honesty. I stared at the check, at my own name written in careful handwriting. It's too much. Not for what you did, Patricia said. You stopped a man who was destroying more than our finances. He was destroying my father's faith in people." Her eyes softened. "Dad told me to tell you something." She paused. "He said men like Dennis spend their lives tearing others down because they're terrified of their own worthlessness. But people like you build things up. That's why you win." For a second, I couldn't speak. The words hit harder than any insult Dennis had ever thrown at me. When she left, the envelope still sat on the table. I didn't cash it that day. I just kept it there as a reminder that decency pays in more ways than money. 2 weeks later, the courtroom smelled like old paper and fluorescent lights. Dennis shuffled in wearing a county jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists. His hair was grayer, his shoulders smaller, but his eyes were still venom. Mom sat in the back row, her hands twisted together, mascara already streaking her cheeks. The judge read the charges: felony embezzlement, fraud, arson attempt, filing a false report. Dennis pled guilty. He didn't have much choice. 4 years in prison, eligible for parole in 2. When the sentence was announced, he turned toward me and smirked. "Enjoy the house, princess. It'll rot with you." I met his gaze without blinking. "Then at least one of us will be where we belong." They let him out. The clank of his cuffs was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. Outside the courtroom, Mom caught up to me in the parking lot. Her face was pale and swollen from crying. "I know you hate me," she said quietly. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't trust you." Her voice broke. Could we have coffee sometime, just to talk?" I hesitated. I'd expected another plea for Dennis, another manipulation, but there was something different this time. No performance, just fatigue. "Maybe," I said finally. "But Dennis can never be part of my life again. Ever. If you still choose him, then we have nothing to talk about." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "I understand." That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in 15 years. We started meeting once a month at a small cafe across town. Always neutral ground. The first few times were awkward. Small talk, long silences, clumsy attempts at normalcy. But slowly the conversations changed. One afternoon, she admitted something that caught me completely off guard. "I knew he was gambling," she said. "I knew about the debts, the loans, even the stealing. I just couldn't leave." "Why?" I asked. Her answer was a whisper. "Because being alone scared me more than being unhappy. I thought if I ignored it, it would stop. But it didn't, and I let him destroy everything, including you." She looked up at me, eyes red but clear. "I let him treat you like garbage because it was easier than fighting him. I failed you as a mother." I didn't know what to say. For the first time, her apology wasn't an excuse wrapped in guilt. It was the truth, raw and bleeding. "Thank you for saying that," I said. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Months passed. The letters started coming from prison. Dennis's handwriting, jagged and angry, even through the envelope. I never opened them. They sat in a box in my office, next to old utility bills and photos from a childhood I was still learning to separate from survival. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't in the courtroom or the check or even the house. It was the quiet, the freedom, the complete absence of his voice in my head. Every morning, I woke up to sunlight filtering through windows he no longer controlled, walls he no longer poisoned, a life he could no longer touch. 5 years later, the house became the center of something bigger. 12 rental properties, a small real estate company, a team of contractors who respected me because I'd done the work myself. Dad's mug still sat on the shelf. The workshop still smelled like sawdust and possibility. Sometimes, when I locked up for the night, I'd catch my reflection in the window and see the kid who once packed a duffel bag and a college acceptance letter, terrified but determined. If I could tell her anything, it would be this: you were never worthless. You were just waiting to remember what you were worth. And you did. 5 years passed. The kind of years that don't feel like victory laps, but steady breathing after nearly drowning. The house, the one Dennis once said I'd never own, wasn't just a home anymore. It was the heart of a quiet empire. 12 properties spread across 3 counties, every one of them chosen, managed, and maintained with the precision I used to survive him. Sometimes I'd walk through Dad's old workshop, now rebuilt and filled with the hum of restoration, and think about the strange symmetry of it all. He'd built furniture. I built futures. His hands crafted wood. Mine crafted numbers. The rhythm was the same. Mom and I still met once a month for coffee. It was never easy, but it was honest. She stopped defending Dennis long ago. Sometimes she'd ask, timidly, "Have you heard from him?" "He writes," I'd say. "I don't read." She'd nod, not pushing. Maybe she knew that opening his letters would be like unlocking a door I'd already bricked shut. Dennis got out last year, moved 2 states away, rumor said. The last letter he sent came stamped from a halfway house and began with, "I've changed." I didn't bother seeing what came after. People like him don't change. They just find new angles. Mom mentioned him once over coffee. "He's working construction again. Smaller jobs." She hesitated. "He asked if I'd tell you he's sorry." I stirred my coffee slowly. "He's sorry he got caught." She sighed. "Maybe, but maybe he's sorry for more than that." "Maybe," I said, because I'd learned sometimes silence is kinder than debate. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been the fuel that got me out. Peace was the engine that kept me going. On the anniversary of buying the house, I threw a party, not to celebrate revenge, but to celebrate reclamation. Friends filled the rooms with laughter. The backyard smelled like grilled burgers, and someone put on a playlist that made the walls vibrate softly. For the first time since I was a kid, the house sounded alive. Priscilla showed up late, still wearing her work badge and a grin. "I can't believe you actually did it," she said, handing me a bottle of wine. "Did what?" "Turn trauma into an investment portfolio." She laughed, then grew serious. "You know, Dennis actually did you a favor." I blinked. "You're kidding." "No," she said, leaning against the counter. "He gave you something to prove. Without him, would you have pushed this hard, saved that much, learned to outthink people like him?" I considered that. Maybe not. She nodded. "He made you strong. That doesn't make what he did right, but it makes what you did remarkable." We toasted to that, not to him, but to endurance. Later, after everyone left, I sat alone on the front porch. The night was quiet, except for the chirp of crickets and the occasional hum of a passing car. I could almost hear Dad's voice again, the calm, steady one that used to explain how every piece of wood had its grain, and if you learned to work with it, not against it, you could make something that lasted forever. I looked at the house, at what I'd rebuilt, and realized he'd been right about more than wood. I'd spent years thinking my worth had to come from defiance, from proving Dennis wrong, from clawing my way into success so undeniable even his voice couldn't drown it out. But sitting there, the air cool against my skin, I understood something different. Worth isn't proven. It's lived. Quietly, daily, without permission. Dad would have been proud, not because I bought the house, or restored it, or built something bigger, but because I learned how to stop needing applause for surviving. Before bed, I walked through each room one last time. The kitchen gleamed. The workshop smelled faintly of cedar. On the hallway shelf, Dad's mug caught the soft light from a lamp. For years, that mug had been a symbol of what was broken. Now, the gold seam glinted back at me like a reminder. Broken things can still hold everything that matters. Dennis had called me worthless. He was wrong. I wasn't worthless. I was weathered, and weathered things don't crumble. They endure. That night, I fell asleep to the quiet hum of my house, the house I'd fought for, rebuilt, and finally made my own, and dreamed, for the first time in my life, without fear.